All right, we're going to get started. Yeah. Doesn't work? Okay. This is Caroline Hardin, and she's going to be speaking about brick in the wall versus hole in the wall.
So I'm going to talk today about the tension between problems hackers have with traditional formal education, brick in the wall, and the issues it faces with just trying to learn everything on the internet, hole in the wall. I'm also going to look at some cool alternative learning environments like hacker spaces, why hackers are modeling cutting-edge learning, and what we need to disrupt the future of education. I'm sorry the mic is broke, so if you're in the back and can't hear me, just let me know. I'll try and speak loud. Anyway, we know that learning and school are not the same thing. So why should you listen to me talk about education, hacking education, and educating for hackers? In short, I am a self-taught programmer who has a computer science degree. I taught CS for 5 years, both at a for-profit career college and in a non-profit hacker space. That's a picture of me teaching in Ghana with Reboot the Kitten. I've been had opportunities to teach in a variety of situations, but like many of you, I hated high school, I've failed classes, and I've learned more from Wikipedia than some of my teachers. The last 2 years I've spent working on my master's in educational technology, studying how to create a better way of learning computer literacy and computer science. So 6 shocking things I learned in grad school about why schools suck. All right, there's more than 6, but these are the things which really surprised me. I didn't know until I started studying the issue, and which I think we really need to pay attention to if we're going to disrupt the system. First of all, what are we even trying to do with school? There's absolutely no consensus on this, although it's been vigorously debated for over 2,500 years, all the way back to Confucius and Plato. Some of the things people say schools are for are to help make you a better citizen, teach you what you need to know to get a job, learn how to think, emotional self-actualization, moral development, or social and cultural development. When nobody can agree on what success looks like, everything looks like failure. So how many of you feel that school was trying to crush your individuality and force you to conform? Guess what? You're right. It was. Because it's that cultural angle that ends up having the biggest impact. Another quote from that same source is, "Since education is always against some things and for others, it bears the burden of our cultural obsessions. We spend more time as a society debating whether to teach evolution than how to teach evolution. Because if we don't have some conformity and basic rules of culture, we don't function as a society anymore. We'd be like Noisebridge." And because of that cultural imperative, education is shaped mostly by policy and politics, not science and research. School boards aren't run by the people who are expert in educational theories. They're run by politicians. And we all know how smart and trustworthy they are. Now, we say that education is the great equalizer. This is true, but our schools are not designed to give equal education to everyone. The system doesn't create a level playing field so much as reinforce your social economic status, which fundamentally shapes how you interact with not only the school, but bureaucracy and authority in general. If we're going to disrupt schools, we need to not make this same mistake. And anytime you try to standardize something as individual as education, you've made some pretty big decisions about some individuals being better than others. Consider that some of the main people who originally conceived and promoted standardized tests, like Carl Brigham of a little test you might know as the SAT, he was originally trying to prove the racial superiority of certain white people by creating a test that was heavily culturally biased. Even recently they did a study which showed that, and I quote, "White students have an edge not on education or study skills or aptitude, but because they're most likely growing up around white people." Our classrooms look and act very outdated. That is a picture from 1907. And it looks pretty much like the way the classrooms look today. What's really weird, though, is that even though the classrooms function much the same as they had for over 100 years, teachers actually are trained in cutting-edge theories. So why don't we see it in the classrooms? Because the system is stronger than the individuals. They come out of teacher training college, and they're just ground down and assimilated. So some of you have had opportunities to teach. I hope many of you will consider in the future. How many of you would try to use good educational techniques, like using different learning styles, the auditory, visual, kinesthetic? Would some of you guys try to do that? Guess what? That's not a real thing. It's total bullshit. The science isn't supported at all. There are no learning styles. But nobody knows that because people aren't properly trained. Our epistemological and pedagogical theories have actually moved way beyond that, but no one has a chance to apply it. And remember that cultural angle of schools? It doesn't matter what the teacher knows if the general public isn't on the same page. A teacher whose classroom is too different just gets destroyed in parent-teacher conferences. We can't fix schools as long as teachers aren't able to even apply the best we know of learning sciences. As far as bad teachers, look, nobody goes into tech support to become bitter or jaded. No one goes into security so they can bitch and have an excuse to drink all day. Most of you probably didn't go into security so you could drink all day. But when you're just trying to do your job and help someone, and no one is listening, and all they do is undermine you by whining and screwing everything up worse. In the keynote today, Adam Shostak said, if you feel really ineffectual at your job, you just get burned out. How many of you have had terrible teachers who you still hate? I do. Bad teachers, they hurt us, and we have not forgiven them. And so when we finally get in a position to do something about it, we cut their pay, we publicly denigrate them, we destroy their benefits and fire as many of them as we can so they can't hurt us or anyone else again. And you're not going to hear this, but that's making everything worse. Attacking the working conditions of all teachers to get revenge on individual teachers diverts energy from fixing the problem and drives good people away from the field, which leaves the schools desperate to hire and keep whomever they can. When I worked at the for-profit tech school, I helped with hiring decisions, and I couldn't hire good teachers because the reputation for the working conditions was so bad. I could hardly hire a warm body, but I was told I had to hire anyway, no matter how bad they were. All my colleagues and I, all of them, were just trying to figure out a way to afford to quit. And I have been that teacher who has had students fail as a direct result of me not having training, time, or resources for them to succeed. And it was the worst feeling in the world. So many teachers are put in this impossible situation that 46% of them, 46% will quit within the first 5 years. The rest risk becoming deeply corroded people. That's where the bad teachers come from. Any conspiracy to ruin public education would make blaming teachers a key strategy. I'm not saying don't be angry at the teachers, but if you want anything to change, direct that anger where it belongs, at the system that created and tolerated them. So those are the things I learned about what's broken in education that really needs to be addressed for any disruption to make a serious impact. So if schools are so broken, can we just get rid of them? For those of you who have not seen the TED Talk by Sugata Mitra, he put a computer in a hole in the wall in the slums in India. And when he came back, they discovered that the kids had learned a bunch of stuff, like magic. So we don't need schools, right? We'll just give every kid a laptop and a Wi-Fi connection. The talk seems so hopeful and inspiring, and I hate to dump on anything seeming hopeful and inspiring, or the idea of giving kids computers and internet access. But if we don't face the reality of why this and similar disruptions don't actually pan out, the system wins. First of all, it's not a new idea. A famous and influential educational researcher named Seymour Papert wrote a book called Mindstorms, in which he said kids learn a lot when they play with logo computer programming. Does anyone know what year Mindstorms was written? Anyone want to make a guess? 1980. Right, over 30 years ago. Like Mitra's TED Talk, Seymour Papert got a lot of press, and a lot of people were really excited about teaching with logo programming. After all, his research said that under the right conditions, it could lead to all sorts of amazing, deep, independently fulfilling, creative learning. You know, the stuff you don't get in schools. The media hype became computers equal learning, and the public said that sounds pretty good. We're going to talk in a couple minutes about what happened to logo. This is what's already happened to the Hole in the Wall project. To prevent vandalism, Hole in the Wall has to put the kiosks on the school grounds. They have to lean on that infrastructure so that they're supervised. This is one that got vandalized anyway and is now literally just a hole in the wall. As far as how much learning happened, even Hole in the Wall had to admit, and I quote, the students would tend to plateau out. When the kids did achieve learning, it was very time-consuming compared to guided instruction. And the kids were just giving up because they got frustrated by dead ends, so Hole in the Wall had to hire local mediators to sit next to the computers and encourage the kids. Oh, how interesting. Great job. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think it really solves the problem to replace a mean teacher who nevertheless knows how to teach with a really nice person who just panders to your self-esteem. A good teacher, a good one, makes a huge difference in learning. But it's more than just being nice and more than knowing the content. You need to know how to teach the content. So many of you had professors in college who were famous researchers but were really shitty teachers. That's pedagogical content knowledge. It's a problem with colleges that not enough teachers have them, and a problem with disrupting the system that not enough people have it outside of the schools. But training teachers is expensive, so of course the government would like to avoid that cost. But just giving laptops to kids and saying, here you go, if you don't learn, it's your own fault. You must be lazy. There's a reason the rich families pay for private tutors, and it's not okay to abandon responsibility onto poor kids without providing them any kind of support. And Learning Sciences knows, after 50 years of research, that hands-on learning without a mentor or a teacher or any kind of guidance is generally slow and leads to Swiss cheese knowledge, has lots of holes and blind spots. Instead, because we know how the human brain works, we should be using that science to structure lessons that are super effective. If you're willing to spend years of trial and error, like many of us did, you'll get pretty good at independently learning by doing. But even so, it's always faster and more effective with a mentor. Letting people flounder is easier, but doesn't work very well. What about apprenticeships? One-on-one apprenticeships really are awesome, but there are problems with scale. There's always more novices than experts. Germany has a successful apprenticeship program, which uses professionally trained teachers for covering the fundamentals. You can imagine how inefficient it would be to teach kindergartners the alphabet by apprenticing them with professional authors. And again, we get back to pedagogical content knowledge. Just because you're good at a skill doesn't mean you're going to be very good at teaching it. What about MOOCs? MOOCs hit the big time in 2012 with Stanford classes on artificial intelligence, and they've been scaring educational administrators ever since. They get good teachers who know how to teach to record their lectures and put them online for free, for everyone, everywhere, anytime. How many of you have taken a MOOC? How many of you have finished a MOOC? A lot less, right? It's about 3 to 7% actually complete. And most of those who do complete already have some college or a degree. The hype is that MOOCs will educate those who've never been to college. But the data shows, and we actually have a lot of data, that those who succeed are the already successful. At least 80%, sometimes upwards of 90%, who complete classes already have at least a 2-year degree. Not only that, but they cost upward of $40,000 a class to produce. It's a model with promise, but we need to do some more work on it. All right, so I hope I've made a good case for keeping good teaching in some form. But do we need the ivory tower, navel-gazing, self-aggrandizing academics? I'm going to finish a story of what happened to Seymour Papert's Mindstorm and logo programming. So the schools bought the computers, but like the Borg, they assimilated them in the most conformist way possible by isolating them in a sterile, lifeless computer lab and letting students spend 1 hour a week typing out in lockstep some pre-formatted programs. Follow-up research was done and showed that the kids weren't learning creativity, and they weren't getting better at standardized tests, which is what they really cared about. So the media translated this research as computers don't work, and Logo was largely abandoned. Since they still had the computers, they gave us all typing classes. So too long didn't read, good ideas, poorly implemented, get subsumed by the system, and then when it doesn't change anything, it exhausts the public's interest for decades. We lost decades of computer programming being taught in school because people didn't pay attention to the academic research and the science and ignored the culture of our educational system. If you fast forward, the idea of teaching computer programming in schools is still a non-starter. So all we get is some after-school Lego Mindstorms and Scratch. And as a point of interest, the One Laptop Per Child project was a direct descendant of all this, and that was the academic researchers trying once again to deliberately disrupt the traditional structure of school. But once again, the traditionally trained teachers and the public didn't really get it and just considered a novelty. So if education is based on outdated theories for political reasons, implemented by bitter and angry teachers for disorganized and unjust purposes, why would you ever voluntarily subject yourself to school? Why do hackers take classes? There is a legitimate debate among hackers on the value of formal traditional education for learning programming, networking, IT skills. The classes do offload some things. They do help out in some ways. They've already found and organized the best learning resources, complete with expert errata. They give you a mandatory structure to lean on with built-in deadlines, and money and official transcripts on the line. That frees up all your mental resources to just learning the content rather than trying to get yourself to actually sit down and stop playing Mass Effect. Not only that, schools still give you a piece of paper which opens doors and keeps your resume out of the round file, helps us meet potential employers, future coworkers, and more people we can call at 2 a.m. when the server crashes. And finally, jumping through those hoops shows a willingness to comply with authority and procedures, which many employers like to see. What about hackerspaces? Of all the disruptions, which have huge caveats, hackerspaces are the most promising. I've heard a lot of people being skeptical about them, especially in the academic institutions. So I'm going to give you 4 big words and phrases you can throw down the next time someone tries to say that real learning isn't happening there and that you should be in school instead. So hackerspaces are good at learning because they're communities of practice which offer situated learning through legitimate peripheral participation with an emphasis on cognitive apprenticeship. So you can pretty much lay that sentence down at the Thanksgiving table and shut everyone up. This is what it means. I'm going to explain it like you're 5, okay? Learning is better within groups of friends who work together. And you need to be able to actually practice your skills in real situations for real clients. Obvious, right? Learning goes better when you're allowed to first hang out and lurk, you're invited to mess around, when you can make a contribution it's respected and valued, and there's experts with whom you can geek out. That's a really big idea. And you learn to think like an expert by talking to experts. All of these are really powerful ideas with a lot of research behind them, so I encourage you to check out their Wikipedia pages. So if traditional formal education is broken, but just closing the schools and giving everyone a Chromebook doesn't save us either, hackerspaces are really promising because they have hackers. This is why I believe hackers have the personality qualities which are directly applicable to us being cutting-edge learners and make us the most likely to invent the future of education. We have lots of historical examples of people who have succeeded by getting what they needed from formal education and had the courage to go their own way when they're ready, and they've all remained lifelong learners. All these people dropped out of college but were successful in their fields. We question authority. This is independent critical thinking. Socrates in Plato's dialogue Meno says, knowledge will not come from teaching, but from questioning. The only way we're going to reinvent the whole system is to question its fundamental assumptions. We read the fucking manual. This is augmented learning. It allows us to use the manual as an external brain, which we can draw upon when we need it. Rather than wasting time memorizing just in case, we use the manual just in time. We make things. This is constructionism. Aristotle in the Nicomachean Ethics writes, anything that we have to learn to do, we learn by the actual doing of it. We apply our knowledge. And we break things. This is learning through failure. Many of you remember as a kid breaking the computer and having to fix it before your parents got home. You learned something when you did that, didn't you? Failure is an incredibly productive way to learn. Schools don't allow us that luxury. They make everything part of our permanent record, encouraging you to follow safe, well-trodden, narrow paths. We'd rather take risks and explore, and it's really important to innovation and discovery. And we're really stubborn. This is called grit. It's incredibly important in overcoming challenges and persisting through difficult problems. We know we can figure it out. Internal locus of control. We believe that we control what the computer does and that we have root privileges in our own lives. I always get frustrated when I hear people say, oh, the computer did this to me. No, we're the people who say we did this to the computer. We also believe that we are capable of learning new skills. This is called growth mindset. Both are important personality characteristics for being active and not passive in the face of learning. We play video games. So when you're choosing your squad, you know you have to balance the biotic, the tech, the combat, based on the scenario you're going into. This is called systems thinking. Very important, very powerful, not taught well in schools. Besides being an awesome way to learn, games are also proven to increase your literacy. We use the hive mind, whether with IRC, GitHub, Reddit, crowdsourcing, it's collaboration. Schools try to say sharing is cheating. Hacking taught us that it's the best way to get things done. And we make tools to do things for us. Batch files, scripts, robots. We call it being lazy. Learning sciences calls it distributed cognition. All these amplify our power to get things done. These tools save us from the boring things so we can concentrate on the more interesting problems. So despite what schools did to us, hackers are really amazing learners. So for the right people, how do we do it? We free the content, we join forces, and we hack knowledge transmission. This time with science. We already believe in the mission. We believe that information sharing is a powerful positive good, and that it's our ethical duty to share our expertise. First of all, we need to create more open educational resources, because knowledge doesn't belong to the ACM or Pearson's Publishing. It deserves to be free. It used to be the only way to get content was through the schools. If we can free the content, we force schools to bring more to the game or get out of the game. Contribute to Wikipedia. If knowledge is socially constructed, then I'd like us to be the ones constructing it. Participate constructively in forums. Don't troll the newbies. We want them on our side. We don't want them retreating to schools. And create and use more open source software. License your work under Creative Commons. Release it onto GitHub, SourceForge. Create Instructables, YouTube tutorials, and so on. Make the knowledge you know free as in freedom. We join forces. Seriously, Space Rogue got to talk to us this morning where he said, join forces, we should be doing this. Join your local hackerspace. Join your local Linux user group, 2600 meetup, DEF CON meetup, amateur radio club. If you don't have one of these, create one. Next time someone says they want to learn programming, offer to answer their questions, mentor them. And if you know someone you want to learn something from, ask them. And teach. Remember how much high school sucked for you? Be a ray of hope for some young hacker by volunteering with that after-school programming or Legos robotics club. And offer classes at your hackerspace, and don't feel like you need to mimic teaching the way it was done in school. Because if we don't create new learning environments that actually work for us, nobody else is going to. And heck, there's a lot of online places. These are online places you can teach programming. The bottom 4 will pay you for your time. There's a great hunger for this. Then we need to hack knowledge transmission once we've freed the content and joined forces. We need to bring learning into the sci-fi age. First, learn about cutting-edge learning sciences. It's super interesting, and whenever you want to learn something, it'll pay huge dividends. Learning sciences actually grew out of computer science. The whole computer as a brain metaphor and artificial intelligence, it came from us. We need to reclaim it. Outdated teachers also pretend to know everything. Don't do that. If you teach model expert learning, show how you figure things out by asking questions. Because in IT, it's not about knowing everything. It's about knowing how to figure everything out. Invite your students to contribute and participate and learn from them. Students are so used to teachers posing as omnipotent experts, you may need to actually explain what you're doing to them. Augmented reality. We have Google Glass and augmented reality. We should be embracing that. From translations to constellations or bird songs, everything available through your phone or other device, it shakes up the whole idea of what knowing means. If this is a boundary we need to push to reach a William Gibson future. And invent something new. What? License agreement. All the cool new ed tech we've been inventing. Khan Academy, Code Combat, Open Badges, Code Avengers, Hour of Code, OLPC, even Hole in the Wall. It all comes from hackers and computer scientists. If you have an idea, throw it out there. And if you want it to be robust and effective, use learning sciences. So, free knowledge, join forces, and use science to reinvent knowledge. Despite all its problems, traditional formal education hasn't had to change because it hasn't had anything to seriously compete with. But hackers are really good at inventing new ways to collaboratively learn. So if knowledge is power, let's reclaim and reinvent it. Thank you.